thanks for agreeing to do this with me today.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. Today I want to talk to you about your law firm, Kirk and Teff. I also want to talk to you about workers' compensation law, okay?
Yeah. Sounds
All
good.
right. So as you know, I'm a personal injury lawyer. I help people who are injured at work, and people who get hurt at work most typically qualify for workers' compensation benefits in addition to what you and I call a third-party claim. In other words, I represent people in a legal or civil action that they file against the party who is responsible for causing the accident and the injuries. You, however, are a workers' compensation attorney, and from what I understand, workers' compensation really doesn't have very much to do with who is at fault. So, Bill, first of all, tell me a little bit about Kirk and Teff, and then I want you to educate the viewers on workers' compensation law.
Sure. So Kirk and Teff, Ralph Kirk, Justin Teff. Ralph's been practicing in workers' comp and in Kingston here for over 40 years.
Yeah.
Justin, I think, is just coming up on 20 years practicing in workers' comp, and I'm coming up on 15. Our firm really focuses, as you said, on workers' comp and Social Security disability. Those two often go together.
Right.
The firm has 7 attorneys. We primarily cover the Albany district of the Workers' Compensation Board, which runs from the northern tier down to lower Hudson Valley. But the Workers' Comp Board has been focusing on virtual hearings,
right,
which are essentially Zoom meetings, just like we're doing now.
Yeah.
They've been doing that for years.
You guys have been, the Workers' Comp has been doing virtual hearings well before COVID, if I understand.
Yes, yeah, and so we haven't seen a slowdown, and it's a good thing for the injured workers because they're able to get the benefits they need, get the hearings they need, and get access to the judges and the board,
right,
to get the benefits they need to get by during this.
Bill, it's been a totally bizarre experience for me as a personal injury lawyer. As you know, all of my cases go to the courthouse, right? So I litigate most of my cases in the New York State Supreme Court, some in the federal court system. It is an absolute injustice what's happening to the courts across the country, but I think particularly here in New York, the courts are shut down. And I think what you just said is important. The injured people and litigants as a whole, not just in personal injury, have no access to the civil justice system. The judiciary is absent, and the third branch of government is essentially defunct, in my opinion. So congratulations to the Workers' Compensation Board for making itself accessible.
Yeah.
Bill, give us a quick overview about workers' compensation benefits. When I deal with workers' comp, I'm dealing with it kind of, I always joke that I'm like the tail wagging the dog. All I know is that my client qualifies for workers' comp. Most typically, they're coming to me after the fact, after they already have workers' comp. And I know that workers' comp is, I call it a necessary evil. It's not a perfect system, but without it, people who are injured at work may fall into really extreme or financial hard times. And so, without it, life would be more difficult. With it, life's difficult, not perfect, but at least maybe they stay afloat. And I also know that in personal injury lawsuits, workers' compensation insurance companies will assert a lien against the personal injury file. And we'll get to that a little bit later, but help the viewers understand what are the basic principles and benefits available through workers' compensation.
Sure. There are some pitfalls to the system, to be sure, but I'm sure you'd hear that from the other side in the insurance carriers as well.
Oh, sure, certainly. Yeah.
What workers' comp does is it provides coverage to an injured worker in the state of New York with 2 main or principal benefits. You get medical treatment for your injury, and that coverage follows you for life, actually. So I think our claims are a bit different than your personal injury cases in that sense that they never close. There's never a true closure unless you voluntarily give up those rights.
Okay.
The other principal benefit to a workers' compensation claim is wage loss. Your entitlement can get complicated. It depends on several factors. It depends on your pre-injury wages. It also depends on your level of disability, how severely you're injured. So it's not a true dollar for dollar replacement of the wages you were making before you were injured.
Right.
But if you are severely injured, it can approximate your net income. So in that sense, it helps people while they're out of work and while they're recovering.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I
And
mean,
it moves relatively quickly, I think, compared to what you do on your end.
yeah, no, I think again, I think workers' compensation is overall a good thing. I think that when people go from reporting to work every day and earning a living wage or better, and then they go from that to having an accident to not working for extended periods of time, the financial hardships that arise from those scenarios can be devastating in terms of credit, stress, and then obviously the hard times that people fall on without income. So, and I think the idea of individuals not receiving medical bills while they get the treatment that they need to recover is an extraordinarily powerful thing, that really puts people at ease and allows people to gain access to the health care that they need following a major accident. I think from my end, where I see imperfections is that it appears that you have to have prior approval maybe before you can move on to the next phase of treatment. Do I understand that correctly?
There's pretty complicated medical treatment guidelines, and the Workers' Compensation Board has done their best to implement guidelines to both speed up treatment and create a level playing field so that everybody knows what they're working with. So, for example, for a back injury, there are guidelines that tell you following a back injury, what treatment is recommended for what types of injuries. And that treatment that's recommended does not require pre-authorization. So that's a good thing for the injured worker. They can get in, they can see their doctors, and the doctors know what they can do before progressing in treatment. But as you move to more invasive forms of treatment, surgical intervention, those sorts of things have very specific requirements and usually require a pre-authorization. So
do you need prior authorization to go to a specific type of doctor?
you do not. There is no referral system. There's no pre-authorization for visits.
Okay.
So if you go to an orthopedist and they say you need a spine surgeon or a neurologist, you can go there. If you need pain management, you can go there. What those doctors want to do may require pre-authorization, but to see the doctor, you don't need any authorization.
What if I'm going to an orthopedist, I have a workers' comp claim, and I feel like I've hit a dead end, or maybe the surgeon's recommending surgery and I don't necessarily feel comfortable with the advice. Can I go get a second opinion without a referral?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can. Okay.
Whether it's someone you know or you get a referral from a primary doctor or anyone else, as long as they are authorized to treat patients under the workers' compensation system, you can go to anybody you like without any pre-approval.
Is the medical bill reimbursement 100%, or will the individuals who are on workers' compensation have copays? How does the reimbursement rate work?
It's 100%. There is no copay and there is no deductible.
That's awesome.
And one of the fringe benefits of workers' compensation, if you want to call it that, or one of the nice things about treating under the workers' compensation system, is if something comes up, if the doctor treats you inappropriately under the guidelines and does something they shouldn't have, or there's an error in the doctor's office with billing, the workers' compensation law protects an injured worker.
Right.
They are not obligated to ever pay for a bill for treatment related to their injury.
That's very similar to the no-fault law. Clients often call me after a car accident and they're seeing these EOBs, explanation of benefits, or these denials of the doctor's medical bills. And what I always tell them is, that's not your problem anymore. When you assigned your benefit over to the doctor now owns the claim, and the doctor gets to fight that out with the insurance company. And that does put clients at ease. And you said that the medical claim, that stays open forever unless maybe the injured party agrees to close it, and typically they might do that in exchange for something at the end.
Right. If you agree to a lump sum settlement, you can give up your rights in your workers' compensation claim, but they do not extinguish automatically.
Yeah.
And that medical coverage is good coverage to have. It follows you through retirement age. It follows you whether you move to another state. And it not only covers any injuries you have in an initial accident, but it covers any additional injuries you suffer along the way. So if you have a knee injury that gives way and you break your wrist as you brace yourself for a fall, that risk becomes part of your case. So it is good coverage to have.
Yeah, and it is different because when I handle personal injury claims, permanency drives value, right? So, I mean, if you have a sprained ankle and you move on, we know what that sprained ankle is worth. It took you a certain period of time to rehab, recover, and you're on your way. That claim doesn't have permanency. But when someone is claiming permanency and we can prove that that injury will likely interfere with that person's quality of life going forward, maybe that injury will require future medical treatment, that becomes a really heavy lift for personal injury lawyers like myself, because the doctors have to really set forth what that permanency claim looks like. The evidence really needs to be there, and you have to be able to forecast it. So, for example, I recently represented a 21-year-old kid who had a horrible leg fracture. He has a rod in his leg. He doesn't want the rod there, and the doctor has some different advice. I don't know what that kid looks like at 45. Right. So I think that that's a huge advantage to people who have workers' compensation benefits, that part of the claim, the medical claim, stays open. Whereas in my world, I've got to forecast that, and that's a real challenge sometimes. I think that doctors are hesitant to commit a lot because they don't know either, right?
Right.
I mean, if you get a hip replacement at 40, are you going to need one more? Are you going to need two more? I don't know how, and that can be difficult to forecast. So that's interesting. Now, the wage benefit, let's talk about that for a little bit. I always understood basic principles about workers' compensation wage loss benefits. You get up to 2/3, right?
Right.
And then that can be adjusted downward based on, what is it, a level of disability?
Yeah, so in workers' compensation, we start with your pre-injury gross weekly earnings.
Okay.
We come up with an average. You're entitled to 2/3 of that up to a statutory maximum. So each year, the Workers' Compensation Board sets a statewide statutory maximum.
Is that right? What is it?
Right now, it's $934.11 per week. Okay?
What does that come out to on an annual? 55,000, something like that?
I would have to do the math, but that's the 2/3 number. So.
Okay. All right.
So that would be the injured worker's actual entitlement while they're out of work.
So if you have a high earning construction worker who takes a catastrophic fall, that individual is going to suffer financially,
Sure.
even with maximum benefit.
Yeah, even with the maximum benefit, it can be difficult.
That's why they need me.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think we should talk about in a bit too, is the difference. And because we get questions from our clients, well, why do I need someone else? I'm getting workers' comp. What else can they get from me?
I know, and I see it too. So we should talk about that. So, but talk to me a little bit about, all right, so it's a 2/3 max.
Right. And then workers' compensation evaluates an injured worker based on their level or degree of disability.
Okay.
100% disability for workers' comp in New York State means that there are no jobs you can do. Okay. It's not just based on your job. So that construction worker or a roofer, they may not be able to go back to roofing, but if their doctor feels that with their injuries, they could do light duty work or a desk job, something sedentary, for workers' compensation purposes, they're not totally disabled. Where that gets people is that 2/3 is then reduced by whatever percentage disability they have. So if you have a 50% disability, you're only getting half of that 2/3 benefit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think you'll probably agree, that's when I start to see a lot of frustration from people who were injured while at work. They receive workers' comp, and sometimes as the personal injury attorney, because I'm so far removed from that workers' comp claim, I know it's out there, but you start to see the frustration that these people have, that they don't have the money coming in, that they need to pay the bills. And I think to myself, well, you have workers' comp, but then when you start to see what comp's paying them in relationship to their pre-accident wage, well, you understand why things are getting hard at the house.
Yeah, and those sorts of vocational factors that we think should play into a temporary disability only come into play when someone is classified with a permanent disability. So at first, when they're out of work, they're getting paid, and it's based on their injury. And as they recover and progress, eventually, if they remain out of work, they'll be classified with a permanent disability. And at that point, vocational factors such as age, education, and work history can be used to supplement a medical disability. So if the doctors are giving 50% at that point, but you have a 60-year-old roofer with an 8th grade education, those vocational factors actually make that person essentially unemployable in the labor market at this point.
Do you have to use experts in your line of work when you're trying to prove your position in a case?
We don't. It's left to the administrative law judge to weigh the factors. So it's essentially the injured worker's testimony is the basis for those vocational factors, and the judge sets the addition of the vocational factors.
Well, so when your client, the injured party, testifies, it's up to the administrative law judge to analyze the testimony and that subjective sort of series of complaints against the vocational realities.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. We don't use vocational experts.
Yeah, I've been using them more. I think
Yeah.
you have to pick your case. You have to know, when do I need that vocational expert, but they can be wildly powerful.
Yeah, and Social Security, I mean, we have a Social Security practice as well, and they do use vocational experts quite often at their hearings
Okay.
to evaluate just those sorts of things,
Sure.
and whether or not that person truly has a meaningful chance to get back to gainful employment. But
Right.
the Workers' Compensation Board hasn't gone that far.
So let's stay on the wage for a minute. I don't really think that this is the same thing, but it's probably a good way to segue. You started to talk about, is it a permanent?
Right.
What is it? I can never remember the phrase.
Well, there's two types of permanent disability under the
Permanent
Workers'
disabilities,
Compensation
okay.
Law. So benefits are considered temporary until an injured worker reaches what they call maximum medical improvement. The doctors have done what they can to restore function and repair the injury, and the person may be left with some serious deficits and disabilities. So at that point, depending on the nature of the injury, they can be classified either with a permanent impairment, which entitles an injured worker to ongoing wage loss payments, the amount and duration of which depend on the severity of the injury, and that's where those vocational factors can help. Or they can be entitled to what's called a scheduled loss of use. It's a one-time lump sum payment for an injury to an extremity that may cause residual impairment, but not necessarily an ongoing wage loss, right? So if you have a knee injury, it may not keep you from going back to work, but you may have permanent damage and permanent restriction in function. And that's what that loss of use is designed to compensate you for.
Okay, I understand. And then we joked about this the last time we spoke, but I get such a kick out of it. The injured people, they get mileage reimbursement or travel reimbursement to and from their medical, right?
Yeah, workers' compensation is a limited system of recovery. One of the things you get is a mileage reimbursement, travel to and from your doctors. And even that, we can get lost in the wind sometimes with the insurance companies fighting over just how far is reasonable to travel.
Yeah. I'll tell you though, it's funny because it comes up a lot with the no fault, right? And the only reason it comes up is when I'm dealing with someone who was hurt in a car accident while working, I talk to them about the no fault benefits that could be available. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the way the law is written, workers' comp is the predominant payer on a work-related car accident. Right. But I do pursue a no-fault claim for the balance of the wages that goes unpaid. So right. if you have 2/3 payable through workers' comp, then that's only 66.6% of your overall wage. Under the no-fault law, you're entitled to 80% of your wage. So when Kirk and Teff refers people to me, one of the first things I do to show off a little bit is go get that balance and get them that supplemental check. It's always a fight because I think I'm like the only lawyer who does it because no carrier is ever ready for it. And it takes forever, but they all pay it because we're right. It's just that's the law. But when I bring up the no-fault benefits, I bring up mileage, and people get pissed when their comp lawyer doesn't tell them about the mileage. So heads up on that. But you guys do.
We tell everybody right off the bat.
Yeah. No, I know you do. Because a lot of times I'm helping people that come to me way down the road, and they have a different comp lawyer. But for some reason, these comp lawyers don't refer their personal injury clients to a personal injury lawyer, which baffles me. For many reasons. One, like why wouldn't the workers' comp lawyer want the referral fee that the personal injury lawyer pays? But more importantly, it's better for your client. Your client's going to get more compensation for that work-related injury. But when I often find it's the other firms that aren't providing as comprehensive an analysis and service. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the distinction between the area of law that I practice versus yours, and let's just start with maybe I want to say venue. I litigate my cases in, for lack of better terminology, a court of law. Most of my cases are filed in the New York State Unified Court System. We initiate our cases in the trial level court, which in New York is the Supreme Court. We also litigate cases in the federal court system. The trial level court there is the district court. But that's, in workers' compensation, you're not fighting every day in a traditional courtroom. Where are you litigating your cases?
Well, now we're litigating them from our offices exclusively,
Sure,
but
yeah.
Traditionally we would have administrative law hearings, similar format to a courtroom proceeding.
Right.
We would have a judge and a stenographer. We would have our client with us, and of course the insurance company would be represented in the hearing.
Yeah.
So you have the same format, but we tend to do things a bit more piecemeal, I think, in workers' compensation than you do.
Sure.
We have issues that come up as somebody recovers as to their entitlement. Right? So we talked about the degree of disability issue. You might be totally disabled immediately following your injury, but as you recover, that disability may decrease as you gain more function and recover. So we may have 2 or 3 hearings along the way through somebody's recovery to address their entitlement to wage loss and whether or not that should be reduced as they progress and heal. So we may have multiple hearings. They may only be 10 minutes, but we're constantly going to the judge, the administrative law judge, to resolve disputes as they arise.
Where do you go when you need to research an issue or understand what rules or laws govern how the case will be litigated? I'm usually going to the civil practice laws and rules or some statutory body. Or
Right.
How does the workers' compensation world flow day to day? Is it regulatory? Is it something else?
There are regulations in place, and there is a long body of case law that governs the manner in which these claims proceed as well, particularly with regard to certain issues.
Okay.
But it is regulatory.
There's a workers' compensation law, but from what I understand, is that like the higher level stuff? Like where's the day-to-day litigation and grind? Where's that?
So there isn't a lot of guidance. The board has been left a lot of discretion in the manner in which it schedules hearings and resolves disputes and litigation. So in that sense, at the basic level, there's a form we file with the Workers' Compensation Board when we want to see a judge, and that will bring a claim on for a hearing. Now that form, we have to indicate the reasons why we need to see a judge on that particular claim, the evidence that supports our request, and what we want to resolve the dispute, or what we anticipate may be needed to resolve the dispute. But that brings it on in front of the judge, and at that point, the judge has discretion to direct what litigation is necessary to resolve an issue. So,
and you can appeal, right? I mean,
you can appeal. Within the Workers' Compensation Board, there are administrative appeals. And beyond that, we can pursue litigation in the appellate division.
Right, right. Now, I don't want to get too stuck on this issue, but what is the Workers' Compensation Board? Because I'm imagining, you know, the scene from 300 where they meet with those weird dudes way up in the clouds or something. I'm imagining the Workers' Compensation Board is like this old body of trolls that tries to screw people over, but what is it?
There's a panel of commissioners. It's an administrative agency within the state, and like any administrative agency, there are levels of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
You know, right down to the people behind the scenes who are answering the phones when we call on a daily basis and need assistance. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, a little bit, I want to get back to things that people care about. And, you know, I often find when people call me, it's typically, you know what, it's here, I'll say this. When people call me and they're hurt at work, sometimes they already have a workers' comp lawyer. Sometimes they're referred by you. We have other workers' compensation attorneys who refer their work to us as well. But many come before they have a workers' compensation lawyer. They don't necessarily know their rights when the accident occurs. They get on the internet, they look for a personal injury lawyer, or maybe it's a direct referral from a friend or family. I tell these individuals, look, you need me. You need the personal injury lawyer. I'm going to handle the civil action, the legal cause of action against the party that caused you harm. but you also need a workers' compensation attorney. I'm not a workers' comp lawyer. I know the overview of it. I know that it's important, and I know that it has a direct effect on this third-party case that I'm going to handle. From your perspective, why do people need a workers' compensation attorney when they're hurt at work? I mean, sometimes they're like, well, why do I need a lawyer? I'm getting my medical benefits. The comp board is paying me, or the insurance company is paying me for my wage. Why do I have to go get this lawyer? And naturally, I think that the concern is for the injured party. They think the workers' comp lawyer is going to try to get in their pocket. So tell our viewers, why should people call a workers' compensation attorney after an accident?
So the insurance companies have attorneys working for them. They have professional adjusters who are trained how to limit their liability and what they pay out on any claim. They have medical professionals on their staff and consultative examiners. They have all the tools to limit what they pay an injured worker. And they may be getting paid right after they get hurt. They may have their medical bills covered.
And many
but
are
they may not be getting all they're entitled to. And there may be more there that we can provide assistance with.
Right.
They may not be told by the insurance company that they have an entitlement to something like mileage even.
That's a big thing. Yeah.
So we work on a contingency basis, just like you do.
Yeah.
In personal injury. We don't charge a retainer up front. We don't work by the hour. And we're happy to sit down and talk with anybody. These days it's by telephone usually, but to go through their claim and what's happened so far. And maybe everything has happened the way it should so far. Quite often at the very inception of a claim, if there's no dispute regarding the underlying accident, things tend to go pretty smoothly.
Right.
But as time progresses and as that claim becomes more expensive, you know, these are insurance companies that are in business to make a profit, and their job is to, the people working on these claims and adjusting these claims, their job is to limit the payout. So sooner or later, you're going to have an issue.
Yeah, well, I think you hit it right there. So that's what I tell people. When they come to me, you know, look, 95% of them already filed their workers' comp claim. They got hurt. Most of the time I find workplace accidents are cause some of the more severe injury profiles that I see. And so really there's no dispute about the accident. The employer's glad to get that comp claim filed because the employee needs it, obviously. So they come to me, the claim's already set up. I always tell them, you're not worried about today. You're worried about 2 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, when the insurance company wants you off the tit, and they're going to start doing everything in their power to reducing those wage benefits. They're going to start nickel and diming that wage benefit. They're going to get you to those IME doctors because they want you back out there working. And so I think that the workers' compensation attorney plays a wildly powerful role in the long-term perspective. And especially with the scheduled loss of use or the other type of permanent disability that you see, that's, I think, really where the workers' compensation attorney earns their money, is to ensure that the long-term view for this injured person looks good and is financially secured.
And I think we play a critical role in facilitating the recovery and the wage loss to get to that point.
Exactly, right.
It's not as if you're going to come see us. If you retain us to represent you in your workers' compensation claim and you're getting paid already, they're not going to start deducting money and sending us checks. You're going to continue to get paid your wage loss benefit. We are awarded attorney's fees when we go to a judge to obtain an increase in benefits.
Right.
Or a continuing benefit.
That's a really interesting fact. Yeah.
So you might retain us. Your benefits might remain the same for several months before an issue arises, but we're there to help along the way with the medical issues, with the mileage reimbursement and all those other things that come up.
I think that's a really good point. Just out of curiosity, so people know, let's have total transparency. Personal injury attorneys in the state of New York are entitled to take up to 1/3 of the gross settlement if the attorney finances the expenses associated with the litigation. What is the fee for a workers' compensation attorney?
It's 15%.
Okay.
We don't charge expenses.
15% of what?
Of any new award to an injured worker. So in other words, if somebody's been out of work for 6 months and they've been paid for that 6 months, we're not going to get a portion of that. They're not going to owe us some sort of money for that. If we do, however, find out they were paid incorrectly for that 6 months, we get to a hearing where an administrative law judge awards them additional compensation. the attorney's fee would be based on that additional compensation they're owed.
Okay. So I remember the last time we spoke, you brought something interesting to my attention. Most of the cases that I see that have this sort of hybrid personal injury lawsuit with workers' compensation claim, those injury profiles are generally traumatic, meaning that they arose in an instant, no one saw it coming, and it was one incident that caused it. And it can spiral into other things, you know, after this traumatic incident. But you see in your practice different types of injuries, and I think you had mentioned repetitive use injuries, and in my opinion, those types of injuries are not going to qualify for third-party claims, at least not typically. But talk to us a little bit about the distinction that you see in injury profiles.
Sure, of course. So you have your accidental injuries, a slip and fall, an industrial accident with machinery, something like that. Those are pretty straightforward in terms of getting established with the Workers' Compensation Board. But oftentimes people are hurt over the course of their employment, and those occupational diseases are compensable under the Workers' Compensation Law.
Occupational diseases, that's the key word?
That's the key word for those. Carpal tunnel, repetitive stress, that sort of thing is compensable under the Workers' Compensation Law. There has to be a link to a distinctive feature of the employment, but they are compensable.
Okay.
And those quite often require an attorney's assistance right off the bat.
Right.
Insurance companies are not often accepting liability for that sort of thing. They want to be sure there's no other outside potential causes for it before liability is established.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about COVID. I don't know if you watch my social media, but I've made several posts telling people you are going to have no personal injury lawsuit from that COVID issue that you have. So in other words, I'm saying COVID cases are crap in terms of personal injury law. They're you know, you're going to recover hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks. You got to prove where you got it, which I suppose is possible, but I just think they're going to be terrible cases. I don't want them. Don't call me for them. But I think that COVID and its relationship with workers' comp is a little different, right?
It is, yeah. The Workers' Compensation Board has been proactive in covering these cases, and there is a body of case law now forming regarding establishment of liability for work-related exposure to COVID. And the buzzword that they're using is prevalence. What they're looking for is a prevalence of COVID in your work environment. So whether that's a corrections officer in a facility that has an outbreak, a healthcare worker in a medical office, or somebody who works in a supermarket and is dealing face-to-face with the public, you know, throughout the day. These are being litigated. Nobody is voluntarily accepting liability for these, but if you can show prevalence in the work environment and a likelihood if a doctor is willing to give you an opinion that it's likely that you contracted it in your work environment versus your personal life, that works. They're not requiring absolute certainty.
Right, and I guess I wouldn't have to prove absolute certainty either. The burden of proof for an injured person in a personal injury claim is by a preponderance of the evidence. But I just see that from my perspective, you have issues of proof. I suppose this prevalence theory could work. But I think from my perspective, we always are focusing on liability and fault in my world, right? People come to me with horrific injuries sometimes, and I say to them, I cannot help you because no one is at fault, or I cannot prove that this other party's negligent act caused your injury. You don't have to worry about that, right? That's not a question for you.
No, and the nice thing about workers' compensation, I guess, is that there's no filing fees. Our fees are contingent. So it may be a small claim. There may be a couple of weeks of lost time in quarantine, but we're going to make sure the medical bills get paid and get paid 100%. So people who don't have insurance or have high deductible plans, that coverage is meaningful to them. And who knows? Most of these cases resolve. They're relatively minor, but there are worse cases. There are cases that linger for months.
There are. And I'm not out here attacking the severity of the illness that arises from COVID. For me, I think it's on a personal injury perspective. It's going to be hard to prove where you got the COVID.
Right.
I think but you can show prevalence, but then you also you have to prove that someone other than your employer was responsible for you getting it. Right. Then, so you're going to need expert witnesses. In my world, I need expert witnesses. So I'd have to bring in an expert to show that you got COVID at your place of employment, but you can't sue your employer. So you got to have somebody else to go after. And they're just not, they're not going to be cases.
Yeah.
And we're getting, it's sad. I'm very, I guess I'm very transparent or upfront about the fact that you're not going to have a personal injury case. But it is sad. I'm getting more and more calls from people who are losing loved ones at nursing homes due to COVID, and they call to find out whether they could sue the nursing home or maybe a hospital for negligence in allowing the sick loved one, the deceased, to contract COVID. Now, in that scenario, I'm not worried about an employee-employer relationship, but you still have to prove that the injured or that the deceased person contracted it in that setting, which may or may not be an easy thing. But then you have to prove that there was negligence. And I don't think that it's going to be very easy to show that any of these medical providers or facilities acted negligently when we have one of the most contagious viruses ever known to man floating around the earth. No one can control this thing. We know that. We have world leaders who contracted the virus. Right. And we know that it's particularly hard for medical facilities and providers. Now, if there's some gross negligence and they try to cover it up or something, well, that's one thing. But I know that most of the medical providers out in the world right now are doing the best that they can to fight this thing and provide good care. So I don't see it.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I think you would have trouble with it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, but, it's not easy when you're getting call after call and you have to tell these people there's really nothing we can do for you.
Right. Yeah.
Bill, in wrapping up, if someone's hurt at work, they call your office. How do they get in touch with a workers' comp lawyer?
Yes, give us a call. We're going to set you up with an appointment to speak with an attorney if we can't get one on the line with you right away.
Yeah.
We'll do a file review for you. The Workers' Compensation Board has a mechanism in place. If you consult with an attorney and you want to know what they think they can do for you, or if you want us to provide an initial review of your claim, see where you're at, we can do that. There is paperwork we can file to have access to your claim and review everything that's in there, all the forms from the doctors, the insurance company, anything filed by the Workers' Compensation Board. We can take a look at all of that and give you a real status of what's there and what needs to be done.
Is there a filing time frame? Do you have to file a workers' comp in a certain time frame?
Well, there's two main time frames to watch out for when you get hurt at work. You have 30 days to notify your employer of the injury.
Okay.
Most often with accidental injuries, they know about it, particularly if there's loss from work. And you have 2 years to file a workers' compensation claim with the Workers' Compensation Board.
I don't follow that. Oh, so if it's a traumatic injury, 30 days. If it's one of these occupational diseases, something else, I don't know.
No, you have two notice requirements for a workers' compensation claim. You have to notify your employer within 30 days.
I understand.
You have to file a claim with the Workers' Compensation Board within 2 years. So there's an employee claim form. It's essentially an accident report, a very detailed accident report to let the state know, the Workers' Compensation Board know that you've had an injury, because if you notify your employer, that may or may not make its way through the insurance provider to the Workers' Compensation Board and result in a claim number being.
I don't know if you know this, but when I deal with cases involving people who are hurt at work, they don't always report the accident in a normal channel, right? I don't know. Let's say you slip and fall in front of Walmart in the parking lot. Most people are going to go into Walmart and report that accident. But if you're that UPS driver delivering to Walmart, you may not report it to Walmart. You're going to call your employer and say, I just took a flop in the parking lot. I got to go to the emergency room. that initial report of accident form that workers' compensation claims are associated with becomes some of the most important documents from the workers' compensation claim in terms of how they affect the personal injury case. That initial report of accident has saved so many of my cases, because without it, sometimes the treatment isn't the next, that day or the next day. That report of accident can save people. And so I always encourage my clients, even if you think you're going to be okay, if you're going to try to push through that injury to stay at work or take only minimal time off, report that accident to your employer, get that document filed, because as you're saying, you don't have to file the claim, right? And if you're better, then God bless you and move on from it. But you don't know what's going to happen and how things are going to unfold.
And if you miss those timing deadlines, there are significant repercussions.
Oh, totally. You can forever bar yourself from the compensation you need to stay alive and provide for your family.
I mean, we don't charge you anything to come in and talk. We don't charge you anything to look at it.
Right.
We want to make sure you're set up and protected going forward. And maybe, like you said, it doesn't turn into anything. You get better, you're well, and you move on with your life. But if it does become something more substantial and you haven't set yourself up, you could have serious problems.
Yeah. All right. And then the last thing is, we didn't really talk about it, but I think we should. So when I'm handling a case on behalf of an injured person who was injured at work, they sometimes qualify for both workers' compensation and, as I've been discussing, a personal injury claim, which you and I call a third-party claim. That's because workers' compensation is a first party. It's somewhat contractual. And then the third-party claim suggests that a third party caused your injury. I think that this is the best of both worlds, but things can get complicated. And I think that for the injured party, it makes a lot of sense to find a personal injury attorney and a workers' compensation attorney who communicate, who truly care about the client's best interest. Because I know when I'm handling cases with you, it's a phone call, a text message, or an email away to say, hey, this is what's going on at my end. How will this outcome affect your claim, that workers' comp claim, or you do it the other way? How is the workers' comp claim going to affect the personal injury claim? And this is important because workers' compensation insurance companies assert liens against the personal injury file. The goal is to recover the expenses that the workers' compensation insurance company incurs on behalf of the injured party. The logic is, why should the workers' compensation insurance company be on the hook for paying all these bills that were necessitated or caused by someone else's negligence? And these liens are sometimes, especially as you know, for these big injury cases, the ones that I'm handling, anymore I'm seeing liens for $200,000 plus. That is going to affect greatly the net recovery for my client. And so I'm often telling people the check that you get from workers' comp and the personal injury lawsuit, when you combine those two checks, is somewhere in the realm of what I would normally get for an injured party without comp. So what are you dealing with? What are your concerns when you're helping someone who's got that personal injury claim down the road? What are the things you're thinking about?
Right. So there's not only issues of lien, meaning the injured party is going to have to give back some of their third-party recovery to the workers' compensation insurance company, but there can be issues that are generally called offset going forward in a workers' compensation claim.
Right.
Even that net recovery that you get after the lien, that can impact your entitlement in your workers' compensation claim, both to wage loss and that lifetime medical coverage.
Right.
In certain circumstances, an injured worker could have to pay out of pocket and then request a partial reimbursement from a workers' compensation insurance company.
Yeah.
It can really be a nightmare. So it's important to coordinate all of this going into a third-party settlement. You don't want to find out on the back end of a settlement that the insurance company's not going to pay you for 10 years and they're not going to pay for your treatment.
Yeah, and this is why I emphasize to people that you shouldn't pick lawyers who don't focus on personal injury law, because those other lawyers who dabble in it, they are going to adversely affect the outcome of your case. I can tell you personally, over the course of my 11 years in practice, I have become more adept and sophisticated at handling the conclusion of a personal injury case and how it will affect the workers' comp claim. I struggled to get my head around this stuff at first. I'm getting better at it. It's still hard. I'm at a point where I really trust your law firm to take the charge on how to close out these workers' comp personal injury settlements. But you have to work as a team. It's in the client's best interest. We have to know, what will our decision today mean for this individual 1, 2, 3, 10 years down the road? We have to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been fortunate to learn from Ralph and Justin. They are two of the smartest people. I would put them at the top in the state in handling the interplay between workers' compensation and a third-party action.
There's no one in the world that knows it better than Ralph Kirk.
I've been fortunate to learn an approach, I'll call it a holistic approach to representing claimants.
Yeah.
I mean, it can get very complicated when you have somebody who has a third-party action, is also applying for Social Security disability benefits, right, and may also qualify for unemployment benefits in the middle of all of it.
Totally. Especially now with so many people unemployed. I'm fighting with no fault with car insurance companies every day because these people who are unemployed and have accidents, they cannot legally tell the labor department that they're ready and willing to work because they're not, because if they got called today to have a job after the car accident, their injury prevents them from doing that. So they do the right thing. They turn off their unemployment benefits, and then car insurance companies routinely screw these people because I honestly think that car insurance companies are not equipped with it to deal with it. But now that we're seeing so many unemployment claims, they're having to deal with it. And these poor people go weeks, many weeks without getting that benefit because they're doing the right thing. They're telling the truth. And then the car insurance companies still screw them over. It's terrible. But I agree this stuff is complicated. I just did a post about this. I think what you and I do is actually some of the most complicated law that there is. I don't care what these patent lawyers say. I don't care what these, T&E lawyers say. Mergers and acquisitions. I think what we do is some of the most complicated stuff. And I can tell you this because I know that your mentor, Ralph Kirk, my mentor, Eli Bosch, these people know criminal law, general municipal law, general obligations law, workers' comp, civil practice laws and rules. That's why they were so successful at what they do, because they have such a broad knowledge and how a claim can affect some other thing that's going on. And they have such foresight down the road. So I think that's where you and I have to be.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's been great for me to learn from them how to represent a person and not just a workers' compensation claim.
Yeah. And I also get a thrill taking money from insurance companies.
Yeah, that's always fun. And we don't leave anything on the table.
No. That's one thing I've learned about Ralph Kirk. I don't want to say he's scrupulous. He doesn't leave a penny on the table. Yeah.
No, I mean, they're not giving you anything for free. So
no, that's true.
We're not letting them
keep
anything in their pocket if we can take it.
Yeah, good. All right, well, you're doing God's work over there, and keep it up. We'll talk soon. This was really fun, I think very educational, and soon enough, the whole world will see it on YouTube, all right?
Can't wait.
All right, sounds good, bud.
All right, take care, Jeff.